Hello, hello, hello. It's me, MC. I'm here to talk about neurodivergence, which I know everyone's like, neuro what? When I first heard the word too, I thought it was really unusual. But when I really started examining what this thing means about being neurodivergent, I really realized that that's where I fall. And I think this is helping me understand why often I feel like I'm on the outside of the in group. I think because I'm someone who has a little OCD, I'm someone who has a little dyslexia or a little ADHD or over emotional and over empathetic and highly creative. And I don't think about things in the way that some other people do. And, now that this concept, I think primarily because of the concept of autism, we're starting to understand that, our brains are so uniquely formed and that there isn't just one set acceptable pattern of someone's brain. And autism is not something that's like a specific type of a developmental result. It's a paradigm. There's a lot of different types of autism. There's the hypersensitivity to sound and light and noise. There's the hyperactivity. There is the hyperintelligence, the hyper musical capability, the hyper, unusual way of creatively thinking and solving puzzles and all kinds of unusual ways of approaching our world that they seem hyper, they seem overt. And yet on the other end, there are these deficiencies where maybe someone's not able to use language as well, or their vision is somehow not the same, or their hearing. So it's really truly opening up our understanding. And I think that's helped me because I think for many, many years, I always felt like I was just the odd man out, that I became impatient in groups. People I felt were talking too slowly. Oh my gosh, which I now see is just my own sense of impatience. And I have this way of thinking of things very fast and probably need to help myself by slowing myself down in groups and being a listener more intentionally. And also too that I have a hyper imagination and I have hypersensitivity, like I can't wear rings and I can't wear certain things on my skin, tags, and a lot of things kind of bother me from a sensitivity perspective. So I really start to realize that for most of my life, I'm one of these individuals who kind of falls into the fringe of being a neurodivergent person, and where I found myself, which is lucky, in music, a creative aspect of singing and acting and performing. But because I didn't fit the mold of some of the things that most people expect from a classical singer. I loved what we did, which was improvisation. Oh my gosh, when someone told me, I'll never forget, I was working with Wesley Balk in Atlanta, Georgia. And when he told me, do anything you want, sing this piece and do anything you want, I felt like someone had liberated me from some kind of a corset. So I then became extraordinarily fascinated by the concept of being in the moment, of being someone who makes things up in the moment, both as a musician, as a librettist, or someone who's making up the words, and who's someone who is presenting it to an audience. And that led me to work with a wonderful group here in New York called Play It by Ear, an improvisational opera company. We did performances throughout the city and the country and even over in Europe. And I adored working with my friends and companions on that company, but it was hard. I think because we were not business people. We were people who were trying to figure out how do you run and make money from being a performing group, and we weren't good at it. And, so at some point, it just had to let go and resolve itself into um, letting go of that iteration. But I deeply dream of a time that I might in the near future find a way to reawaken that aspect because I so adore the idea of making up musical pieces in the moment based on audiences' ideas. It was the most fun I've ever had singing and performing ever. So I really know that I love creativity, and then I fell into doing research where creativity is a major deal. And innovation, I've even fallen into that. I love innovating something that I really didn't think was possible. And so I'm doing a research study now as an innovator. I'm very excited. I'm getting to launch it starting next week, where I'm going to be working with participants who have chronic pain to see if this software that I have helped develop will actually help people with their perceptions of pain. So, I think there are two sides of being someone like myself who has this concept of neurodivergent. You do always feel like somehow you don't fit in. There's some kind of a neurotypical concept that exists in the frameworks that our school, that how our businesses run, how certain interactions for places are done. And being someone who is on a neurodivergent, we find it extraordinarily challenging sometimes to be in the neurotypical framework. And so I find that I have to work with myself a lot. I don't ever see myself leaving therapy. I think I always will be in therapy because I have to work to understand myself better and how to, not just allow the dynamic of whatever it is that I'm working with be the predominant factor of how it is that I choose to live and work, which is difficult. I think we all want to fit in. That's the thing. Is a person you want to fit in. And so you sometimes choose to ignore the things that make you feel uncomfortable. You'll ignore the noise, you'll ignore the, discomfort in the a place where it's, loud or I mean, it's just challenging. And so you figure out, "This is how I have to, fit in." And I think for me, I carefully choose when I'm going to interact in those kinds of dynamics because knowing that so often my hypersensitivities and high sense of empathy and my impatience in certain situations, it's not useful for me. I'm much better in smaller groups, in situations where there's not so much noise or sound or overwhelming stimulus. And so, it's those things that I have to kind of figure out, that they just aren't for me. But it takes a long time. Here it is. I'm someone in my 60s. And, I think it's not until like maybe in the past 4 or 5 years that I really have learned that this is who I am. So, when you think about what is neurodivergent, it's not really like a diagnosis. Someone hasn't diagnosed me with neurodivergence, but basically it means that there is a different way that the brain can be organized, and that there are ways that are neurotypical, which is typically, the norm of how people are interacting and learning and associating in communities. But then there are those people like myself where we work differently. We have brains that don't function the same way, and a lot of the people that are neurodivergent, they do have these diagnoses of ADHD, where there is this attention disorder, or maybe they have some spectrum of autism, perhaps, where there's a sensory sensitivity, or there is a a typical challenge of either social processing or communicating. There is dyslexia, where you are someone who somehow your brain doesn't process the written language in the way you see it reversed. That's some of the things that I have challenges with. I'm mildly dyslexic. While there's other people who are somebody who has dyspraxia. I didn't realize that this was there. It's a difference in how you have organizational coordination or motor coordination and planning. There's some kind of a disruption there. You don't see things in the typical way that people would coordinate and plan, which to me, what a wonderful attribute that is, because that means that you are someone who can be highly innovative. There's also this dyscalculia, which I think my mother has a struggle with because she processes numbers and math where it's just overwhelming. She can't really get into any kind of numbers and math. She just totally, I think she just can't perceive it. And then surprisingly, Tourette syndrome.